Welcome to the With Winning in Mind podcast. I'm your host, Heather Sumlin, along with my co-host, Troy Bassham. And today we are discussing support team and how a support team can be beneficial or maybe a liability or an asset to the athlete. So if you're a parent or a spouse, please take the time to listen and learn.
So we were talking this morning about something that has happened several times over the last couple of weeks, and that is individuals struggling with outside distractions. Yeah, influences or distractions that really are unnecessary for them to focus on.
Absolutely.
And so I gave you an example, professional athlete. You followed back with one from a high school, and then I said, well, wait a minute, it's the same as collegiate. So what we're talking about is this. So a high school athlete would fall into this category to where they're trying to please mom or dad. Like, I really don't want to disappoint my parents. And it's weighing on them in competition. Where you brought up that the college athlete, wait, what about the ones that are trying to keep their scholarship? Because that happens a lot with our clients where they're worried that, coach is going to take away my scholarship.
Or I'm not going to get to play. I'm losing my starting spot.
Yeah, and I don't want to lose it. It's like I'm losing something. You know, something's being taken away from me. And then on the professional side of it, you have the spouse that's freaking out because the spouse is like, oh my gosh, we got to this point. They have a position, they've established something, but it's like a 1-year deal. Or I made the PGA Tour. Okay, great, we made the PGA, but you're only given a limited time, and if you don't win and establish top 125, you don't stay. You got to be in the top 125 to stay. But let's face it, if you're in the top 100, you're probably making $1 million that year. So you're doing quite well. So if you're
been a golfer,
you should have been. Actually, your husband should have been.
He would be better at it.
Yeah, well, they just pay more.
Yeah, but I mean, he would actually be better at it.
Yeah, but the women are starting to pay these women golfers. So if you're a female and you're playing golf, right now is a good time to be playing golf. The LPGA is starting to get some traction.
So what you're saying is Ashley needs to pick up golf clubs.
Oh, I wish I had my daughters playing golf.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway,
I'll introduce her to that.
It would be the same. It would be the same though, because if I'm making it, it's like I'm at this level, I'm winning, I'm doing great, and there's benefits to it. The shift goes from, instead of trying to make it, now the shift goes to where I don't want to lose it. And what's interesting is it's not the athlete that's worried about losing it. It's the outside person that's causing the athlete to think that direction. Now I've got
so
one.
It's the parent, it's the spouse, it's the potentially even, again, pageantry could be the director.
Parent losing my scholarship, or I'm going to lose this opportunity at a professional level. So I've got an example on all three of those because I work with a bunch of athletes in those different areas. And what's interesting is up until you get to wherever you want. So in high school, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get a college scholarship. Most athletes are trying to get a college scholarship. And two reasons why it's important. Number one is they personally want to earn it and feel like, hey, I earned this, I deserve it, and then they want to go to that school and be part of that team. Another one would be more the external is, mom and dad supported me all these years. I need to take some of that so they can recoup some of the money in a form of a scholarship. So mom and dad don't have to pay for it, kind of thing, which I think is kind of noble for athletes. So that happens a lot where we'll see athletes that I want to earn a scholarship because my parents have done so much, I don't want them to pay for it. Even though 9 times out of 10, the parent will tell me, Troy, we've already got college covered. We started that when they were born. So they don't need the scholarship. They don't need to add that pressure to them. But the individual adds it because it's something they feel like is important to them.
Right.
But then once you get it,
you have to keep it.
Yeah, and keeping it and allowing the external influences that weigh on you, that you perceive on yourself, which is really an interesting dynamic because in most cases, the parents are going to love their athletes regardless. But the athlete's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to disappoint mom and dad because if I disappoint mom and dad,
so it's interesting because I just did a parent talk at Miss Texas Spring Showcase. So I sponsored the Miss Texas organization, the American System. They had me come in and talk to the parents. And that was one of the things that we discussed was your expectations that they, a lot of times these girls will believe that they're not going to match or meet the expectations of the parents. And a lot of times it's just a miscommunication. They don't realize that the parents aren't expecting them to win. They're just expecting them to do their best and enjoy the journey, but they haven't had that discussion.
Yeah, then what's an interesting dynamic is when you take an individual sport or activity and then you have a team dynamic. So you have a team dynamic. So I had a collegiate athlete, really good athlete, actually All-American,
Nice.
okay, soccer player, and the team's not doing so good, which means they're not doing as good as normal because the team's struggling. And then all of a sudden the parents like call me and say, Troy, what's going on? I'm hearing back that the coach is thinking he's lost confidence. He's not playing well. He says nothing's wrong. I mean, what is going on? And I'm sitting there going like, well, the team isn't where it needs to be. And for whatever reasons, most of the time in collegiate sports, you have a couple people leave, they graduate.
Oh, right. The team changes every year.
Changes. In this case, it was a combination of some injuries to some key players. So now you got two of your star players are not playing, and you have a couple young athletes coming in that are learning their role because you had some graduate. So now you've got the core. So you got 3 stars. This one that I work with is one of the stars, but he's got 2 others. And so now you got young players that are having to play a role that they're not really ready yet. And so it's going to take some time. And I'm like, it's early in the season. It's not a problem. She's like, no, he's losing confidence because he's talking about not getting opportunities and this and the other. And then when you talk to the athlete, they're like, no, it's just, I'm fine. It's just I'm frustrated that I'm not having as many opportunities. So it's the communication. And it reminds me of the principle that we've talked about in the past called principle of picture. It's not important what we say, but it's critical what you call someone a picture. So this athlete is calling home. Parent is like, what is going on? And they're just like, I just wish I had more opportunities. And then the parent takes it as in, my kid's not getting any opportunities. I'm used to him creating opportunities, taking advantage of opportunities. What's going on?
He must lack confidence.
He must lack confidence. It's got to be something like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then you get one story from the parent, completely different from the athlete. You see this on the professional side with the spouse and the athlete. This.
But I like that. I like that if you're working with a client, if their parent will call you and not go straight to the athlete, or the spouse will call you and say what their concerns are and not go straight to the athlete and make the athlete doubt.
Yeah, and it's one reason why I like to do when I'm working with an individual in the very beginning and I'm showing them the performance model and showing how conscious, subconscious, self-image work together. I want whoever's closer to that individual, the athlete, to be there. And I have the athlete draw out their triad model with the other supporters. So it's, typically it's mom or dad if it's a high school collegiate athlete. And then if it's a professional athlete, it's usually their coach or maybe their spouse or a caddy, for example. Caddy would definitely be one. And oftentimes they don't match.
So
they look different.
For those who are new, who are watching this and don't have a clue what we're talking about with performance model and triad and that kind of thing, we teach a specific system, the mental management system. If you haven't read With Winning in Mind, great book to pick up. But we do have past videos that you can catch up on some of the things that we're talking about too.
Yeah. But basically, just like this model behind us shows, it's those circles are representing the conscious, the subconscious self-image, and we want them to be balanced and working together. Most individuals aren't. The skill is really, really good, but they're not thinking appropriate. Like they're off in la la land somewhere. So they will not be the same size circle because they're not doing what they should be doing equally. Self-image is someone's belief about how they're playing. Many times it'll be different. It'll be smaller oftentimes than their skill level, meaning they doubt their ability. And there's a lot of reasons for that.
Well, but the reason we're talking about today is the external influences from your support team. And so what I have seen, I'll just give pageantry as an example because that's it's pageant season. So that's where my brain is. A lot of times a girl might be thinking everything's fine. And then all of a sudden the mom or someone decides, oh my goodness, so-and-so said such and such or did such and such on social media. You're not doing enough. your competitor is doing XYZ. Did you know that she's partnered with this national organization? You're not partnered with anybody. You're not doing enough. Seriously? We were fine. We were fine. And I like to always make this point in pageantry, and I think it's the same in the majority of the sports that you work in. It is not necessarily an opponent-based sport. Like pageantry, there's no opponents. There's fellow competitors, absolutely, but it's not an opponent. You don't have to study them. You don't have to know what they're doing or how they're training. You just have to go and do your best and then let the results happen.
Yeah, you don't actually beat them. You wind up being the victor.
You wind up being selected.
Well, in golf, for example, you have 150 people playing. 70 people are going to make the cut, maybe more depending on ties, roughly. And then you're like fighting to try to win the event. But you have no direct impact on the individual. It's not like a wrestler where I could try to influence you in keeping you from taking me down, for example. Okay. Here, I can't affect someone who's playing 2 or 3 holes behind me.
No.
Nor less can I affect someone if I'm a rifle shooter, an international rifle shooting competition. I'm on point 10, but yet there's 50 people on the firing line. Well, there's nothing I can do to affect the guy that's shooting on point 40.
Well, and you better be balanced. You better be balanced, because if you're not, then you're not going to reach your...
Yeah, so what happens is you have the external support group is thinking one way, and if you look at the model, it looks completely different than what the athlete is thinking. And if they're not on the same page, what do you think the conversation is going to be like at home?
Oh, it's not pleasant.
Yeah, it's like, no, they get in arguments because it can't be this, it can't be that. It's, oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is. And then, so when I was talking to one person last week, they were panicking, and it was like, I'm hearing feedback that it's a confidence issue. But yet you're the middle coach, so you tell me is it confidence? It is not a confidence. Well, they explained to me why they gave it the last 2 opportunities they had, they didn't perform well then. How is that not a confidence issue? And then I made the comment, I said, okay, the team, it's a team environment. I said, the team isn't playing well right now. And I said, so you have a self-image of a team and a self-image of the individual player. So there's not as many opportunities for this player as normal. For example, take a baseball player who's a reliever and they're used to pitching 3-4 days a week, but now they're only pitching twice a week. So now the perception that when they go in there, they have less opportunity. So what do you think they want to do? Try to take advantage of that opportunity.
Do they over-try in that scenario sometimes?
It's very likely. Very likely.
But that's not nice. Is that a confidence issue or not?
Well, if there's someone I'm working with, it wouldn't happen. But what happens is that you find out what works for people. There are some, like baseball pitchers, there are some pitchers that want to pitch a lot. There's others that don't. They work very good if they spaced out. So starters will rotate every 5 days. Okay, so if you're a really good pitcher and you're a starter and you don't want to pitch more than twice a week, well, then that's a great role for you, is to be a starter. But let's say that you're a person that wants to pitch more often. I like to get out there and pitch on a regular basis. I don't want to just sit there and just be the cheerleader and then wait 5 days to get my opportunity. Okay, I find that for me getting out there multiple times a week, I just play better. I can find my groove and get into it. It's just what works best for them. When you take them out of that, then it's hard for them to get kind of in that groove. But that doesn't mean they can't run their process well. That doesn't mean they can't perform well. It just means that externally, the environment's changed to where, hey, the team is doing so good. Like, what do you do when your starter pitches so good and they go 8 innings? Well, then if you're a reliever, you're not going to pitch because the closer is going to go in there ninth and close it out. So now, okay, well, none of us relievers pitch that day. But what if you're with a team that, man, all of our starters are struggling and they can't even get to the 4th inning? Well, now you have relievers that are getting to the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and 7th innings.
So they just get more practice.
Yeah, so they get in that little groove. So there's the dynamics of the sport, and then you got the dynamics of the external influence outside the sport. And meanwhile, this athlete's expected to perform no matter what. So they come home and they got one person telling them one thing, and it's like, look, the situation has changed where this individual isn't isn't able to do what they've been doing because they're used to. Like I work with a guy that has been. So 3 years ago, they were the most used pitcher in Major League Baseball. Mm-hmm. That means they're pitching more innings than anyone else, pitching a lot. So let's say that same person this year, all of a sudden, is only pitching twice a week. You think that's going to be a little bit of a struggle?
Probably.
You're one of the most used pitchers, and now you're not being used at all. Has nothing to do with the fact that they don't want to use you. Has to do with that situational happens. Yeah. Like it's a blowout. We're not gonna throw our best guy out there if it's a blowout.
It's not necessary.
Yeah. We're winning by 10 or we're losing by 10. What's the point? We're not going to do that. Okay, so then you got to wait and you got to wait. So you have that transition, and it's funny because all the outside people look at is stats. Mm-hmm. And the stats don't share the whole story. It shows part of the story. But it goes back to what we're talking about is, can that outside influence, because they're talking to the athletes, like parents, like every collegiate golfer I work with, either mom or dad, one of them two are going to most of their competitions. Mm-hmm. And they're talking to that parent all the time. Is the parent talking to them in a way that benefits the athlete, or are they talking in a way that's causing an issue?
I think one of the biggest challenges I have had is that the parent is not the coach or the director. And a lot of times the parent doesn't necessarily want to be, but attempts to be, and sometimes unknowingly. And then they get in the head of the athlete.
Yeah, and this is why I like to have the parent and the athlete together, if I can. In some cases, it works better not to, but in most cases, I think having them on the same page. So, if you're a spouse or you're a parent or a coach or someone on the team that you're working with the athlete, making sure you're on the same page is very, very important, because the individual can go in there and it's like, okay, so they're talking to you and they're worried about the athlete. Mm-hmm. And how many times you said, look, he or she's fine. You're worrying about something that you shouldn't worry about. Yeah, how many times that happened?
All the time.
And then they look at you like, no, you don't understand because this, and this.
You. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm like, look, they're fine. And then guess what happens? That week they perform great, and then you look like you.
When that support person stops worrying and starts just supporting and being that cheerleader, all is well. When that support person becomes obsessed with being in the middle of it all and trying to fix it all, and I'm a fixer, so I totally get it. I want to fix everything. I want to find the solution to everything. And sometimes, especially in sport, your kids don't need you to fix it. They need you to be there to be supportive of them, to build their self-image. That's your job.
Yeah, and then the question becomes, well, how do I support them correctly then? So you bring up a good point, building self-image. So what is one way that you help recommend that they help build their self-image of the athlete?
In Dad's book, Parenting Champions, he brings up a pretty good point. He talks about the 3 magic questions that you ask after, like when you pick up your kid from practice or from a game.
So is there a specific order to these 3 magic questions?
I would always start with what went well. Like, what was your favorite part of practice? Something that forces them to have to share something positive. Imprints, all of our imprints impact self-image. So positive imprints grow self-image, negative imprints deplete self-image. We're always looking for opportunities to help our kids grow. So what went well, or your favorite part, what did you enjoy the most, something along those lines. And then what did you learn? If there's something that they learned that was critical for them to be able to remember later, and most athletes don't seem to keep a journal or a log or a record of corrections, which to me is a little bit disappointing, because if your coach is taking the time to give you a correction, you are not going to remember that automatically. You might remember it right then and you'll take that correction and you'll apply it. But if you don't grab your journal, write it down so that the next time you go to practice, you go back, what did I learn last time? Let me go look and see so I can apply it again. Your coach is a broken record and they're telling you the same thing over and over, and your mom and dad are paying for it.
Yeah, so it's costing you more time.
More time, more money.
More headache.
More effort, more headache. And it also leads to a lot of frustration for the parent because they're like, coach told you that yesterday, but they don't necessarily remember. So
therefore they're not learning.
learned,
They're not learning what can help them in the future.
what did you learn? And then what are you going to do about it? Or something along those lines. Where
So putting the ownership on the athlete.
One thing that some of my younger athletes, the ones that are still having mom and dad drive, okay, mom and dad are picking them up, driving them. Do your journal in the car on the way home from practice and talk it out with the parent.
What if their parent's a bad driver and their handwriting's bad?
They'll work it out. They can do it at stop signs, stop lights. It'll work out.
What if they live in one of those states where they don't have good roads and it's bumpy all the time?
Well, you can have an excuse for everything if you want to. But what I would say is the way that the performance analysis is laid out is pretty similar to how you should communicate with your kid anyway. So what I did today, what I learned, what went well, my goal. So if they're filling it out as they're communicating with mom and dad, it's mutually beneficial. And if they're not old enough to be able to really write or write legibly, so my younger athletes, 8, 9-year-old gymnasts, for instance, mom and dad will sit with them, help them write it out. But it's a great exercise, and it helps grow self-image at the same time.
Yeah, I think keeping a performance analysis is important. I think also writing it down, then talking to your parent or significant other works better in that format, because what did you end in writing your performance analysis? What went well? What's the first question they're going to ask? What went well? So it's like a back-to-back thing on doing that. But we're basically looking at it to where there needs to be communication, and people that are, whoever the main support person is of the athlete needs to be on the same page of the athlete. If they're not on the same page, they could make a comment that could cause an issue that doesn't need to happen.
That's the other interesting thing in Parenting Champions, and is the idea that your passion level, your interest level, your participation level, if you will, needs to match your kid. And a lot of times it doesn't. You know, mom will be passionate about their kid being involved in this activity, and the kid is like, oh, I kind of like it. There's a difference. And then you're off balance. You're in a different place. And that kid's not going to be able to reach the success that they're capable of because they have way too much pressure. If mom or dad is passionate about it and they're just interested, then they're going to put way too much pressure on them. They're not ready for it. They don't.
But then if they don't put pressure on them, and you have the opposite. So you have to find that balance.
You have to know. You have to know what's the participation level of your kid, and you need to match it.
Well, I've had conversations with Brian, our brother, and for there's a twin, and he wishes dad put more pressure on us because he really didn't put pressure on us when we were growing up, and wish he would have done that. And there are athletes where mom and dad put a lot of pressure on them that today, like if you look at the Andre Agassi's book, you know, under a lot of pressure growing up and so forth. But then you look at how his career panned out. But I also think you can find a lot of it to where it's backfired, you know, where it wasn't. And so I think you're right. If you have that participation level of the athlete is met by the same participation level and understanding of the parent, then you can move it. Where I struggle as a coach is when the athlete says they want something, but their behavior is different. Like their actions are totally different. I'm more interested in, okay, if you're going to tell me you want to win and you're not training.
Yeah, wanting to win and training to win are two completely different things.
Yeah.
I want a lot of things that I'm not working for.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I'm not going to get them.
But when you're young, I struggle with it when you're young, because when you're young, like if you're in high school, for example, what reasons do you have not to do things? You don't have responsibility of paying for a mortgage or paying for food or making sure that all the stuff that you take for granted, like clothes on your back, shelter, food, that kind of, mom and dad are taking care of that. And if you're an athlete, they're also taking care of all that too. They're making sure you have the equipment, you know? And so now it comes to where all you got to do is manage your time. It's like, okay, I need to go to class. Got to go to school. That's important. I got to make sure I stay on top of my studies. That's homework. But you go to practice. Are you taking advantage of that practice or not? Are you taking the advantage of the opportunity you have? Or do you just go and kind of, or not go? In individual sports, like in the sport that I have, a lot of shooters have a training device at home called SCAT, where you can literally, like the room this size, I could train in as a rifle shooter.
You can?
Yeah. You only need 5 meters. So I can take a target that's a reduced target from 10 meter to 5 meter.
Smaller.
So I just smaller area. And the software will take that distance and say, oh, if it were 10 meters, this is what your hold would look like. And this is what the shot would have been from that distance. Yeah. And it even go up to 50 meters. So the software does it. Technology does it. So you can literally train at home. So there's no excuse for you not to go home, knock out your homework, have dinner, whatever, and then train. But yet you'll see, hey, have they put in the time? No. And so now you meet with this person on a Saturday and you go to the range to do live firing. And yet this person hasn't. It's kind of like when we took piano lessons back in the day, and we never practiced a week, and then we go to lessons. How did she
know I hadn't practiced? Because you still suck.
Yeah.
I hadn't put in a lick of practice, and I would practice like right before, as if like cramming.
That's going to help.
And I thought I could get away with it, and no, not at all.
Yeah, but it is interesting staying on the same token. And oftentimes, and I'll finish with this, oftentimes the one that's making the issue is not the athlete. Oftentimes it's someone in the support group they're worrying about things, trying to stay ahead of something, but in reality they could potentially creating something.
One thing that I like to tell people when it comes to worry is, obviously we want to stop worrying because it's just a waste of valuable time. But I say wait to worry. Wait until there's actually something worth worrying about. Take a step back. Watch from the sidelines. Believe that everything's going to work out just fine until there's an honest reason to be concerned. So don't jump into worry too quickly.
Yeah. So make sure you're on the same side as your athlete, or if you're an athlete, make sure you're on the same side as your support group, coaches, teammates, mom, dad, spouse, etc.
Your job is to support. Your job is to build self-image. Your job is to become a Patreon member. If you're not already a Patreon member, we would love for you to join. Troy and I are going to talk about how you can better build the self-image of your athlete if you're a support person. I'll put a link to how to join in the description of this video. Thank you so much, Troy, for your time. Like this if you do. Share it with a friend. We appreciate you.